Commission. Folks at home, if you're having any trouble watching us on whatever channel you're watching, we're outputting over 3 methods. We're on Zoom, we are broadcast on LMC TV, and we are on our YouTube channel. And if you're watching, thank you for your interest in village affairs. Can I get a motion to open the meeting?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting's open. We have 2 agenda items tonight, and they're both administrative. Just as a housekeeping matter, I want to let folks know that we have some turnover. Both Andrew Maggio's term and Seamus O'Rourke's term have come to an end. Seamus will be moving, has been appointed to planning. And so we're going to lose both of those experienced, very helpful voices. They've been diligent contributors. I really appreciate Seamus's organization and questioning. I think he's added a lot to our ability to build a record with the applications in front of us. I'm really going to miss him. And Andrew, whose last meeting we found out was last meeting. I really appreciate it. He took on the part of the administrative job of chair, and did the vice chair duties and wingmaned me on a lot of calls and letter writing and the other stuff that goes into it. I really appreciate both their efforts. I'm going to miss both of them. Thank you, Seamus.
Yep.
I think you'll do a great job at planning, and I'm glad to see you in that seat.
Okay. Can I ask Seamus to change his mind?
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I will miss it. It's been a pleasure working with you guys. I'm sure we'll work together on various things. Thomas, particularly, just a very steady hand, well-run meetings, and I think gets us quickly to the heart of applicant items. So it's been a pleasure, and thank you.
Thank you. So we have 2 administrative items. First of which is the Boston Post Road Bridge, and at this point, most of what I have to do is report. First of all, the process is different than with other applicants. Since it is the state, what happens is the New York Department of State does consistency. We don't vote on it. Rather, they apply our LWRP as we see it. And that means that we act in a consultative role and explain what our policies are and how we think about them and how we apply them and what we do and don't find consistent. They take our concerns, in this case, as best expressed in our November letter, which went on at some length about the various issues. And we hand them our concerns, and they review them, and then they discuss them with us, and then they are the permitting authority that allows the state agency, that is the applicant, to go forward. So we're in that process now, having produced a rather thorough letter explaining what our policies mean for the Post Road Bridge. The state has assigned somebody to it. We've discussed with them how we see things, and then we've participated in some discussions with the DOT and the contractors who are the DOT personnel on the bridge. And of course, we want to move these things along to consensus about what they can do as rapidly as we can, so as not to hold anybody up. We did this on a very expedited basis, so that within the space of a few days before our work session, we managed to have a long discussion with the contractors and the state, and then do a site visit. Andrew and I got on a boat with the harbor master and a whole bunch of folks from the state's delegation and got out under the bridge to take a look so we could really evaluate it. The major issues of those that we laid out in our letter, many of the issues were simply making the environmental record that we needed to understand the impact. And I think there are no insurmountable problems there. We have the major issues that remain are 2 that I think loom fairly large in this village, and they're both floodplain related. One is that the current proposal on the seaward, the harbor side of the bridge, includes a significant amount of net fill in the floodplain, which anyone who's been around this commission for the last few years knows is a hot button issue. We interpret our policy 11 to incorporate the no net fill rule from the code as a prophylactic protection against development that puts persons and property in harm's way in the flood zone. And for that reason, we have not voted consistent on applicants who can't find a way to take it out. Typically, we've had applicants figure out ways to get their net fill down to zero. In other instances, it's been more difficult. There is much of that was planned to fill the space created by an old building that is no longer usable, that was at the base of the bridge abutment. There are probably ways around that, and we're in dialogue now to deal with that with the state. They understand our issue. We've explained that it's not particularly something about your project that is actually going to cause the floodwaters to rise, at least as to that concern, but rather that in order that we not allow development that will tend to strain our rescue capacity and put people in danger, there are certain things we don't allow. Net fill in a floodplain is a real problem for us. In order that we don't start contradicting ourselves, they understand that that's a difficult rule for us. And it looks like they're being creative about finding a way to solve that. And ultimately, they will work it out between the state agencies. But we've made our point of view very clear to Department of State. And I have to say their personnel are good and smart and seem to understand why we interpret our policies the way we do. So the other major issue is that the current plan calls for a constriction of the hydraulic hole in the bridge, the space the water flows through. This can be a little tough to understand. So this is first the reason that we did the site visit, and second, the something that we've spent a lot of time reviewing the record on, and the state's submission on this issue is on the Novus agenda and is publicly available, but it's a lot of paper, and it sometimes is easier explained by someone who's already done the work of digging through it to understand it. On the landward side of the bridge, the arch is cut off by a sewer main that forms a straight line across the arch. It's a big 60-inch sewer pipe, and while it's being replaced, it has to be put in exactly the same place because the sewage system is gravity fed, and they can neither move it up nor down without disrupting the gravity feed. So that cuts off the height of the arch. The part of the arch at the sewer is just a little narrower all the way around than the rest. There's a proposal to do something that's called a tunnel liner, which is a metal arch inside the existing arch. And that's just a less than a foot constriction across the arch. And it's actually no more than the narrowest part of where the sewer bridge forms. It would just extend that narrowness through the rest of the bridge. That alone may not be such an issue. There is, because it may not actually produce much constriction at all. There is another aspect to that, which is the footing that the tunnel liner would have to sit on. And that footing from the water line down would add a fair amount of constriction, big footings under the tunnel liner that would make the waterway under the bridge from the water line, from the median water line down, a lot narrower, several feet. These are they're 3 foot diameter footings. So we would lose several feet. There are a lot of different ways to model these things, and we've been going back and forth with DOT and its contractors to talk about flow in terms of cubic feet per minute, and to analyze it in terms of flood height. Where we're at now is the plan that they've put in front of us would cause higher flood levels by a fraction of a foot But given the village's experience, higher flood levels are not something that we can take lightly. We said in our letter that any constriction to that bridge would be not consistent. They're saying that the constriction at that point is so controlled by tides and so controlled by the bridges upstream that it shouldn't matter. And we're working through those assertions, and it is both technical and highly loaded because we view these as issues of literally life and death. There are very few properties that are affected between the Boston Post Road Bridge and the Tompkins Bridge, which is the next bridge up. And the Tompkins is tighter. However, the Tompkins is currently out of service due to damage from Ida. And at some point we may have, we're looking for funding to get it. Apparently the village is looking for funding to get it rehabilitated, but we may end up with a different structure. And we may end up with a structure that constricts flow less than the current one does, which would make a difference. Right now, there's at least some evidence on the DOT side to suggest that that Tompkins is such a constriction that any change in the height of a flood level at the Boston Post Road Bridge would have zero effect above Tompkins. That affects very few properties, so they say that's less of a concern. We are very sensitive to this issue, so we're still working through that assertion. However, if Tompkins were to be improved, which could happen in the near future, we would not want the Boston Post Road Bridge to be a limiter to how much benefit we get out of improvements upstream. Obviously, as folks who have paid attention to flooding issues in this village pretty much all know, the biggest problems are at Halstead and at Ward. Halstead is where the river takes you've heard me say it before, but for the folks at home, 32 square miles of Westchester County drain into the Mamaroneck River and the Sheldrake River, and they meet at Columbus Park. And then the Mamaroneck River takes a hard left and a hard right, almost 90 degrees both times to get under the railroad tracks. That's the biggest single problem. But we can't accept any result that would make the floodwater go higher or stay longer in the areas that are most subject to flooding, or that would prevent us from realizing the full benefit of any improvements we're able to make, either at the Tompkins Bridge, or if we're able to ever get the Army Corps of Engineers plan back on track at the Halstead Bridge, where we need the improvement the most. We don't want to call something consistent that would prevent us from getting the full benefit of probably expensive and much needed fixes somewhere else in the lower river. So that's what we're looking at. We're working through those issues. The state would, of course, like to get its plan approved immediately. The Department of State, whose job it is to say yes or no to that based on our LWRP, understands the importance of being very vigilant about how we deal with floodplain issues. And so ultimately, Department of Transportation is going to have to get their approval from DOS, and DOS is in communication with us about how they see things. They're sensitive to how we interpret our floodplain policies, and they're working through those issues. It does require that we continue to stay abreast of the discussions in our consultative role. Ultimately, it's a state agency to state agency discussion, but we're not looped out. We have to be looped in. So essentially, that's the report I have, except that we're going to take up this conversation again with DOS on Friday. I would like to not do this alone. So I'm gonna see if I can get any of you folks to volunteer to back me up on a Friday 1:30 p.m. call. By that I really mean Randy.
Is that
so
this Friday?
I'm sorry.
So Sorry. So I am flying to Florida. Let me just check my flight time to see if I land. I will. Is it virtual call?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just check my itinerary and see if I can get on. Just 1 second.
Is it this Friday, the 17th?
Yes.
I can join if that's useful.
Thank you, Seamus. That would be, and you know, I know you haven't had your first meeting with planning yet. I know of no reason you can't do that.
Okay.
So I land in Orlando at 12:30. So I can get on the call, but just it would be probably in a cab. But
Yeah, that sounds like it's a real burden. I don't need to put that on you. I'm glad to see that you're willing to step up and help. I really appreciate that. But I also don't mean to like make your vacation extremely difficult. I'm glad Seamus can do it. Also, it's probably less learning curve on the issues because he's sort of been through the papers.
I can join if you want to have another person on. Up to you.
We can go up to 3 and it's still a working group. So that's great. I will touch base with you folks after. Cami, don't worry about it. Really enjoy your flight. But I will touch base with you gentlemen after about the logistics of I can't remember if it's Zoom or Teams, but logistics of getting on and we'll do the call and make sure you're up to date on the sort of bid and ask from the prior conversations and know who the players are. That's about all the report I had, unless John Kellard has been working and reporting on the hydraulic hole issues. John, if you have anything to report, I'll turn the mic over to you, but you don't have to if you don't have anything.
No, sure. Thank you, Tom. And I'm available Friday afternoon also if you'd like me on the call. I have been communicating with the engineer from McLaren's office. I think it's John Spears. He is looking at other models through the Mamaroneck River. He shared some of that information with me this evening. He didn't want to make it public because he hasn't shared it with his client yet. But what he did was he actually looked at, we had a long discussion yesterday and this evening. And as you had mentioned, the restrictions in the bridge do increase the water surface elevation. But the water surface elevation increase does not extend past Tompkins at this point, because there's a significant hydraulic jump at Tompkins because of the restriction in the bridge. So what we discussed and what he looked at today was removing all the bridges. He removed Tompkins Ward right up to the railroad bridge, Olstead, the railroad bridge, so that we had the maximum flow coming through the lower reaches of the Mamaroneck River with no restrictions. And obviously it showed a significant drop in the area of the village north of the railroad. But it also did not show an increase above the 0.2 foot of elevation increase in the lower reaches. And he doesn't believe it's going to show much of an increase above the storm surge elevation of 12.5 feet. So he wasn't complete with his study. He was progressing on it, but he also made it clear that they intended to meet with your board once that information was available and provide an additional presentation to the board on their additional findings. So they are listening to your comments, and it appears they are looking to address them.
Don, what's the way to understand? I'm not a hydraulic engineer, whatever would be the right. So if you reduce the restriction at the most downstream bridge, in many events, doesn't that have to be binding upstream somehow? I mean,
Well, it's reflected upstream. Obviously, you have less capacity, so your water surface elevation increases. And it's not increasing higher than the surge from Long Island Sound. That's still a higher elevation if you had a storm surge in the area instead of a river event, which is what they're actually looking at. But at Tompkins Avenue, you have a significant rise in elevation in your stream bed. If we even disregard the bridge itself and just look at the elevation, you actually lose that increase. So they believe it's going to show specifically. What they've provided me this evening showed that beyond the elevation of the storm surge, the restriction in the Post Road Bridge does not increase the water surface elevation beyond that elevation of 12.5 feet. So it extends possibly to about 300 feet past the Tompkins Avenue Bridge.
We should take a look at we should take a look at how many homes that affects and what elevations they're at. You know, little things make a difference, right? In other contexts I've told the story about walking into a friend's house as the Ida floodwaters were receding to find that the flood elevation line stopped at the top tread of the stair below their kitchen floor. Literally less than an inch. Sometimes an inch is the difference between somebody having fairly minor damage and gutting their living space. So, you know, while we're listening, and I'm glad that they're modeling it, I think I've tried to convey to them, and I know one of the engineers for Department of Transportation says he's in a flood zone and has been rescued by boat before. So I think at some level they get it. These are very serious issues for the village. Inches matter a tremendous amount in who is and isn't affected. When you have people swimming out of their cars and getting rescued by bucket loaders, you take flood issues really seriously. So, you know, I think they are trying to model so that they can prove to us that the existing design doesn't have to be changed. I have not slammed the door on hearing that, but I don't think they can't have any guarantee that the Department of State is going to sign off on the existing design, reducing the flow through that bridge unless they're absolutely convinced that it's not going to cause anybody to have a worse flood experience in an extreme event. You know, the Department of State gets what our concern is, and they have the power to say, no, design something different. You can't reduce flow. So we'll see what happens. And I know the state is trying mightily to convince DOS and us by extension that the existing design's okay. We're listening. It's an ongoing conversation.
Yeah. Hopefully they're going to answer the right question, which is, in the worst flooding event that you can imagine, if this is constrained, is there more water somewhere? I mean, it's got to be a layman's answer, I think, for this commission, because this is not a commission of engineers.
Yeah, I mean, the way we put the questions are pretty simple. Will it make the flood water any higher? Will it make it stay any longer? Or will it prevent us from getting the full benefit of fixing any of the other bridges? And they understand the questions. They're trying to answer them. You know, we never shut the doors to an applicant's producing enough information to convince us that something's consistent. And, you know, in this sense, even though we don't vote on consistency on this, in this sense, we've sort of conveyed that attitude to the Department of State. And if everybody's convinced that the present design will not make the floodwater go any higher, stay any longer, or prevent us from getting the benefit of any fixes to the upstream bridges, then, you know, we shouldn't have a problem with it. But we need to be, it's not hyperbole to say we need to be life and death sure of that, because we are, if we say, yeah, okay, go ahead and tell them it's consistent, then we are saying we are sure we're not putting our neighbors in harm's way. And that's a big thing to say. Okay, that's about all I have to say about Boston Post Road Bridge. we have one other administrative item, which is reorganization. This commission elects its own chair. I am happy to continue to do it, but I also can't impose that on my fellow commissioners. If anyone else wants to stand, then I will recuse myself from voting and drop off, and you can make your determination. You just let me, and I won't be offended. If anybody would prefer to, run the meetings.
They say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And you're doing a great job. So, especially with the loss of our two other excellent people, I think continuity is very important. Not to mention somebody who knows what the heck they're doing.
I agree, especially being one of the newbies.
Great.
The turnover's
I think that's a good
been-
decision. Yeah, I was gonna choose carefully on how and if to vote based on how they all went down, but I will be happy to cast a vote, Thomas, for you to continue to do the great job you're doing.
All right, I suppose I can call for a vote on that. I guess, okay, I'll nominate myself as chair for the coming year. Second,
Second,
all in favor?
aye.
Hi.
Thank you, folks. Try to do a good job. Okay, so that's our reorganizational business concluded. We have no other agenda items. Does anybody have new business? I hope everybody has excellent, merry, joyous holidays with their family. Get some time to enjoy some time off and the lovely village we all live in and that we try to maintain. And with that, I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Hi.
Have a real good night, folks.
Bye.
Night, everybody. Thank you all.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.